Hi, welcome to Moving to a New Place, a podcast on race, faith, and all things in between. My name is Dalton Holloway. Also on the podcast, Mike Lennon, huge OG Anubi fan. In this episode, Mike and I talk about Jesus, the imagery, art, and intentions coupled to the most influential man in the history of the world.
In a lot of churches, Sunday school rooms, sometimes in the church foyer, there'd be a picture of Jesus. And very often, I'd say more often than not, that Jesus' skin color looks very, very white, very
Speak of the features,
European.
too. Speak of the features.
Well, I don't know. It'd be the flowing hair. I've heard some people call it blonde. I don't think I ever saw blonde Jesus, but
Me neither.
But I did see, them looking European, Caucasian.
Yes.
I would have thought of him as could have been someone for my family.
Your lineage.
I had some uncles. I even have a brother who grows a beard easily, too easily, and thick long hair. He could be Jesus. So you see that. Tell me about your thoughts about that.
Yeah. So in my household, in my life, my parents went to church very often in Jamaica. And as early as I remember growing up, we had a couple of books that were stories of the Bible. There was one, maybe someone out there knows what I'm talking about. Maybe you do too. It was yellowish, goldish, with like red. It's like an embossed red on the front, and it said "Stories of Jesus" or something. I remember seeing it in a lot of black households, a lot of Jamaican households had this book.
Yep.
And it was stories of Jesus or stories of the Bible. And when you'd read them or see them, there was always imagery to go with it. And oftentimes in that book specifically, and other Bible books, the characters were European looking.
Yeah.
There was no real diversity when it came to the characters. I mean, maybe
They're probably written and produced in Europe or the U.S., right?
for sure, no question. I think maybe the Ethiopian eunuch, is probably the only character in any of those books who were black or not European, because it's plainly stated in Scripture. This is who he is, so you know where to go to get the color.
Shout out to the Ethiopian eunuch.
There's no question he gets the props, and who knows what all these other characters look like, and really when they were walking the earth. But in these books, he got the color, he got the color check.
So why is that? Like tell me what does it do to you now to look back on that in light of all these things? Why is that? Do you feel like, wait a second?
Well,
what gives you pause?
What gives me pause, because even thinking of education that I grew up with, history and all that sort of thing, there's a consistent drum of the people who are the instrumental people in the history of the world, Canada, whatnot, and they're all white by and large, save February. Save February, Black History Month, when we get.
Which is
stories.
Relatively new.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's when we get the stories of, Martin Luther King. And even then in Canada, there wasn't really a focus on, Viola Desmond, our $10 bill. I remember when it was first announced that she was going to be on the $10 bill. And everyone was asking, who is that?
Yeah.
Nobody knew who she was.
Yeah.
And that was, 2-3 years ago, I think that announcement was made. Now she's circulated and whatnot. But there was no real story told that I remember even in high school of her.
Yeah.
So when I say Jesus, or when I pray, when I speak of him, what image comes to mind?
Yeah.
Historically within the church, we definitely have used literature and a lot of art. You can look at, the Catholic Church and their churches and their ornate decoratives and everything that's there. And
sure.
there's, the saints and whatnot. And I don't think I've ever seen a non-white saint in any of those, mirrors or mosaics.
Yeah.
When I was going to the Presbyterian Church, I was going to Presbyterian Church before I started to go to Eastgate.
Yeah.
I actually drew a picture of Jesus who was white and brown hair, just looking like that classic image that was in all these books.
Yeah.
And the church in response made a banner, because at the time, the church that I was going to, we'd put up banners for different seasons,
Right.
So Christmas season, we had a picture of Mary and Joseph and Jesus, the baby, in the manger, and change it up. So my picture that I drew became one of the banners that got put up.
Yeah.
And I'm revisiting that now and thinking to myself, what we know of the geography of the Bible,
Yeah.
where the places are that Moses, Exodus, all these places, you think of Lebanon, Iraq.
Yeah.
When we look to those places,
Yeah.
those people do not look European.
Yeah.
I've had many conversations with family members who don't believe in the God of the Bible and saying, well, I'm not following a white Jesus.
Right.
Why would I?
Yeah.
Given our history of oppression.
Yeah.
Especially, for Jamaicans especially. For any British colony, right? We were colonized and slavery were sent and so on and so forth. So why would I put myself underneath someone who doesn't look like me? Why would I put myself underneath someone who's white when our whole history has been that?
Yeah.
So it made me take pause, and that wasn't necessarily for me the what's going on. For me, it was the geography. Honestly, it was, let's look at this place that exists.
Yeah.
So why is it that we would not want that to be reflected in the stories?
Yeah.
So a lot of theories, right? And some of it has been proven. There was a sense of wanting to lord over and make sure that that the person who's above you is white to those who are black. There are a lot of black grandmothers who, were grown up in the church and had that. And some have those pictures of Jesus, that the classic one of him with I don't know if it's the left or right look and the brown hair and the red sash and all that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So it made me take pause and to realize that there was great error done with that. And we need to be honest about what that geography was, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Jesus might have looked more like Mohamed Salah from Liverpool,
Yeah.
He might have looked more like that.
Yeah.
And what that does to a person when they say, well, who is it that I'm appealing? Especially Jesus being so important, crux of my life,
Yeah. I'm interested about the impact of that too. And for me, one of the scandals of, this is going to be a scandal to somebody though, anyways, whatever he is. I do think it's a shame to make him something that he wasn't. That is the part that I think is offensive. To make him European is offensive because it takes what God decided to make local and to make, because he was something. He wasn't like an ethereal, I'll fit into whatever you are.
No, he's a real person.
He was a representative human, and he was for all people, but God decided to put him into a culture. So he had a skin color. He had an actual color of eye and the whole thing. He was fully human. And he wasn't an amalgam of all people. He was a particular family, a particular culture. To make him something else, for one thing, especially if the intention was, I don't know if every reproduction of Jesus was that intention, but certainly I can see, it's just horribly tragic to think of him being portrayed that, in colonial cultures or slavery or any of those that were to see Jesus is better identified with, your European people who are in charge of everything. That's just horrible. Yeah. It's absolutely brutal. And it's a part of the history that needs to be faced.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's also scandalous by its very nature to all people that he was something. He was like like you say, he had a skin color, and someone might have found that skin color offensive, but that's what he was. It was legit.
Absolutely. So it's so think about it that way, and I think of moments where I've seen other iterations of Jesus, right? So I've seen a picture of Jesus with dreads.
Yeah.
Right. I've seen like a
Sure.
black Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And I remember showing to someone and someone laughing about it, like,
Yeah.
that's funny. And it's like, well, because our default Jesus is
Yeah.
the one who's like, that's the real one. That's what he really looked like.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I remember seeing a Scientific American reproduction. You know, of course, we don't have a definitive.
No.
Is what, right.
No.
But I saw their rendering of it, and I was like, whoa, like that is not that 1950s image of Jesus that we're used to seeing. And I really do think, Mike, that if there was ever a time when, you know, all the churches or anthropologists got together and all these people came together and came to a conclusion where this is, we now know for reason, for absolute 100%, this is what he looked like, that people would walk. That some people would say, I cannot accept that look. And they would walk. I think that when it comes to identification, that it is very important. And I really do believe that some people identify with that look of him enough and so much. I mean, you think of, and I'm not even talking just about like the KKK, obviously. They would not be, they do their own thing. Obviously, that's not on the table. But I really do think that some people who are just regular, run-of-the-mill, they've clasped to that enough that it'd be like, I got to revisit this. I don't know.
Then
How do you feel? Well, how do you feel about it?
I would say then they're not Christians. They would be, what would you call it? I mean, it's too vague a phrase to say you're nominal. But if your religion is based on he has to be this skin color, then that's not what Christianity is. It's by its nature. That's not what saved by grace is. That's like some sort of. And definitely, I think you're right. I think there's people that wed, and lots through the centuries, there's lots of different nations have done this to put their religion and their nationality or ethnicity close, like, you know, make them one and the same.
Right.
So therefore, your people have pride in your people, and your religion is all wrapped up. Hitler was successful in doing that. He wedded Lutheranism with his Aryan beliefs and superiority and traditional folkloric, with the view of the people, the Germanic people, as being superior. So he managed to get those two together and swayed a whole bunch of people. Now, there's lots of reasons why he was able to do that. It wasn't the same Lutheranism as when Luther was around.
Right.
But, you know, once you have great power over people if you can control the religion and make it a servant to the state. So I won't name names, but there's some politicians that really want to do that.
Yeah.
And I cannot figure out the reason, but some church leaders capitulate to that, and it's tragic. And I just think it's brutal. So yeah, I think some people would, but it's not necessarily like they probably left the road of true Christianity a long time ago if they're able to think that skin color is so definitive.
Yeah.
Then they've somehow wrapped themselves up and projected themselves onto God in ways that are really antithetical to what the actual scriptures teach.
Yeah. The power of image, the power of moving images are very, sometimes it's subconscious sometimes, you know, when you see something enough.
Sure.
I remember seeing Son of God, the movie. Roma Downey and Mark Burnett put it together. There was a mini-series on television, I think it was called A.D.
Yep.
And they did a whole, I don't know if you watched or not, but it's a whole series of the Book of Acts and all these characters who were, just pretty much reliving, Paul and, his time in Athens. So I didn't really watch the full thing. I kind of read a synopsis, but I knew it was going on. So I guess what happened was they made a movie called Son of God based on the life of Jesus. And it was great. But I just thought they really could have done a better casting of Jesus.
Yeah.
given, I think this was,
He still looked pretty European to you.
he didn't, no, he did look European.
Oh, yeah.
You can watch it and you
Yeah.
can find out yourself. Like he still looked European. I thought that was a miss. I don't remember how long it was the movie came out. I can't remember off the top, but I was like, at a time like this,
Yeah, why couldn't
this would have been
it's
a great
perfect
time
opportunity, yeah.
to really kind of
Yeah.
change the needle a little bit. But it just kind of went consistently with it, and you can't underestimate the power of image, right? Jesus movie, all those sort of things, which were used for good, and people have come to faith. But again, when you take that time to close your eyes and so on and so forth, I don't know where people go.
Yeah.
I don't know everyone's mind and hearts,
Yeah.
but those images inform a little bit.
So are you arguing for accuracy, or are you saying we need to portray him as yet different even than he was?
Well, maybe it's a situation where we just do a cessation of imagery of Jesus. Maybe that's what it is.
Oh, interesting. You're an artist. So for you, you're a creative person, went to an art school. For you to say, for artists to stop depicting Jesus, that sounds kind of wild.
Well, I suppose. But when I think of people making a change and a shift, especially when it comes to things and how much art informs those things, some people can't necessarily divorce art from their spirituality.
Yeah.
A lot of times those things are difficult to do. Even when you think of imagery, say something like Psalm 23, right?
Yeah.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. But sometimes you cannot help. And again, there's a poeticness to that psalm specifically, right?
Yeah.
But when you're going through stories of Jesus and whatnot, you want to you need to give a sense of uniformity. There's a person who's Jesus who is, 5 loaves and 2 fish, for example. He's there. What does he look like? We can't not do that because we're trying to paint a picture.
Yeah.
Right? And is it a situation where just God allows us the ability to put whoever that person is in our minds?
Yeah.
And to go there? Yes, that's what's happened up until this point.
Yeah.
But is there a point where we say, you know what? When it comes to trying to inform the mind of people, music, all these things, they're so powerful. Like, I'm a musician, so I know.
Yeah.
Music takes you to a place, images take you to a place. But is the person of Jesus one of those things? I think about I think about Judaism, right? Even in Judaism, they do not write the word. They don't write the word God, right?
Yeah,
because if I do, I need to keep it there forever, no matter what scroll or scribe or piece of paper, because it's so sacred and holy.
I don't know. I can't really argue on behalf of visual artists because I'm so not one.
No, I hear you.
I feel like the potential power to illustrate so many things, through a paint, like a parable in a sense, is a kind of painting. So when Jesus says, when he uses a cultural picture to get the people to think, like he'll use a Samaritan. Well, a Samaritan looked like something.
Right.
They were a mixed race, so they didn't look like Jewish people. So when he says, the parable of the Good Samaritan, he has 2 high-ranking ecclesial officials bypassing one of their own countrymen because they think he's dead or he's just too much trouble or all kinds of things. And the Samaritan, when he introduced the Samaritan in the story, they're all like, oh, Samaritan. And there's a visual picture for them.
Of course.
Now, he doesn't paint it, so granted to your point, but he is painting a picture for them of someone who looks different. And that's part of the shock. So I would say, like, you might be just removing the opportunity to just try to get back to the original shock that's meant to be with the fact that Jesus did select a skin color, that it's a human skin color, and that's not the point. That the point is that he was real. And what did that mean in its context? Not, does it make this person somebody that I can identify with? That gets to something that makes me ask a question then about how you view, society. And maybe that's a result of society being largely white in your picture. Who's on TV, who are all these people who are powerful in your life and in your experience. And maybe other people feel this too, that if you're not represented by that, then there's this clear feeling that you don't matter.
No,
Right? So
yeah.
is that part of that?
No, I don't think that's
Okay.
part of it. I guess if you're doing a hierarchy of heroes, if you want to do it that way, right?
Right.
Like I have people in my hero bank, right?
Yeah.
Like these are people, musicians, athletes,
Yeah.
or whoever, people personally in my life who have this, and they're all shades.
Yeah.
Some of them are black, some of them are so on and so forth,
Sure.
right? But maybe in my eyes, when I think about like the figure of Jesus, the person of Jesus, right? And I think of even songs, right? Look full in his wonderful face, and there's an imagery that even artists have gone through musically about who he is. Like, what is it that we see, and what is it that we look for, or and is it wrong for someone to say, "Well, I need to see myself"? And I guess you mentioned it too. That's not the point, and I agree with you. But when you think about how many images of Jesus and artistry that has been used to kind of galvanize who Jesus is and Jesus was, can certainly point to there's a negative, okay, well then it does put me back. And again, when I think about a certain demographic, so let's say, just for this conversation, let's say slavery, because as an example, right? And you have people bringing this Jesus to you who, they were using images.
Brutal.
It wasn't just some
brutal.
Some questioner.
It does drag even the name of Jesus through the mud to associate him at all with that, but then also to make him whiter than he was. It just adds insult to injury. I totally see where you're coming from. I mean, it's brutal. It's actually awful. But so I guess the only thing is I have to say is that there was already this idea in the Jewish culture to not make graven images of God, right? They didn't have idols and statues. It was like, don't do that about God. But it was like almost like a setup for God to do it himself. So the incarnation is like this artistic revelation, the exact representation of God on the earth. All of a sudden, and it was very scandalous for people to observe and appreciate, and of course they killed him. It was just too much. But Jesus's very nature was a revelation of God himself, but like with a color, not my color, but a color. So I don't know what to do with that. If an artist has put something out there, you sort of want to see it.
It's true.
Or appreciate it for what it is.
Absolutely. And then I think about even Islam saying they have nothing.
Right, yeah.
And kind of in response to what they were seeing with this Jesus. So there is merit to say it's not like this is out of scope or like this has never been done before. It's like it's been
We need a visual artist.
Right?
You know what? Nick was taught by a painter named Phil Irish at Redeemer in his first year. He was in the fine arts program there for a bit. And I'd love to hear what he's written about, images of Jesus through the centuries and that kind of thing. Just to get a little background on that, because I think the political aspect or the people influencing aspect of it that you're saying is fascinating to me. And it does seem, like the Muhammad Ali quote that's going around, the interview with him where he talks about everything was white Jesus, white this, white that, Some of it's tongue in cheek, funny. Yeah. Some of it's like it's good comedy. Like somebody wrote he thought that out. Like obviously very brilliant. I was familiar with Muhammad Ali in a slight way, but it's only in more recent times that I realized how articulate he was, and was sort of able to poke at the culture stuff, kind of like you were saying Dave Chappelle could do.
Yeah.
But it's true, to make him more white is a political seizing of something.
Right.
I think that's the part that's offensive. To seize Jesus and make him your culture is offensive. You're right.
And then
I don't think I'd felt the weight of that. I'm feeling it as you describe it.
But there's also a response to that, right? Some other regional places. And I mean, we'd have to look back, and I don't know the history of all the images, right? Because I'm sure there are other cultures who did make him their color. Like, so even the image that I told you about, Jesus with dreads, right? Like some people it's laughable, but someone said, I want to follow, that if I'm following the Savior, how do I see myself in him? Yeah. And that does, and what you said before, there is like why are you doing that? But when you're seeing it being done up until this point on the European end, some of that response might be, well, it's my turn, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't make it right. But
Well,
but you got to see like why, there's a
Yeah.
rationale behind it,
like, I think one of the things that the medieval, for example, painters did is they tried to take a biblical scene from its time and place, and then they would put it in their time and place. So wearing the clothes of their current day,
Right.
and people looking current day. So that was supposed to be a jarring thing. You'd see like, oh wow, this ancient story taking place on my street, and the people all look like me. It suddenly brings the story alive in a fresh way.
Yeah.
But danger is, now I'm seeing myself in that, and what if people actually thought that's what you're saying? But if you looked at it from its context, you would say the jarring thing would be, it's just like the Canadian painter who put Jesus on the cross in like a Canadian city, being crucified by Canadian soldiers. And then it goes, whoa, like that's just too
Too real.
it's too real. But it makes you appreciate a little bit more like these were the soldiers of the day. These were the occupying force. This is what they were doing.
Yeah.
So there's a way in which, like I've seen this on missions things too. Yeah, you could portray Jesus in China as Chinese, or in Vietnam as Vietnamese, or in Africa as African, in order to make the point that he was for all people.
Right.
If an artist the soul's made to interact with that as a poetry, as a hyperbole, like still saying something true, but exaggerating something. But he wasn't actually. You don't want to create a mythical figure.
Because he was real.
He was
It
real.
wasn't mythical.
That's the only thing that's the whole point of the Gospel of John, and certainly Luke is trying to show. But by the way, this is a real person. I touched him. I saw him.
Yeah.
He walked around. He said these brilliant things. He actually did these things. We who were there saw it and written this down for you to hear, so that you would believe that he was real, and that he was also the Son of God. There's just that juxtaposition that we want to hold on to. But what it does for art, you're right. There may be, just like if your culture is prone to drinking too much, and maybe everybody in town says, you know what, let's all stop drinking for a while because we can't handle it right now. We need a break. That's what a monk does to leave the city and leave all of the stuff. He's like, I'm so polluted right now. That's what the early mysticism things were. It's so polluted here. It's so corrupt. A garden doesn't even mean a garden anymore. It means a place that you go and hook up with people. He's like, I need to get away and I need to say no to all of it for a while. And maybe what you're saying in a sense is sort of like Jesus has been used so politically and turned into a figure of power, or to align with power. Maybe we just need to stop for a while. Just stop doing it. Just quit it. Now, does that, to me, right now, it's becoming a political thing. I'm not really following the story that closely, but apparently, someone suggested taking the really white Jesus, rip those statues down or pictures down, burn them, and then someone else interprets that as you saying, you want to take all our... You want to destroy everything about Jesus.
Yeah, Christianity's going down. Like you're trying to make this whole...
That's that whole world where people are not hearing each other, and they're not sitting down and having this kind of conversation where you just go a little deeper. I'm not saying I'm right either. Like I didn't think about how... I think I thought about it rationally, but not emotionally. Just to see a picture of a white Jesus hanging on a wall while slaves are being taken into a ship. That's just... I can't imagine that not grieving the heart of God, and how it shouldn't grieve my heart too, and just say, that's a good reason not to put a picture up, like, or to take a break from that, if that's what's been done. Or I would say alternatively, it's still a legitimate expression to say, well, let's paint an accurate one then. At the very least, let's make them accurate. Let's not make them look European, because he wasn't European.